Hey everyone, today I would like to talk a little bit about Jump Force DLC Season 2. At this point, Yoruichi and Giorno were leaked a long time ago, and at the time of recording this, Yoruichi has been officially revealed with a gameplay trailer, screenshots and other promotional material, but not Giorno. Anyway, I want to focus this discussion on Giorno, and what his inclusion in Jump Force may mean for the future of JoJo's representation in Jump crossover titles. All of that up next. So as you probably already know, Giorno will be one of the final DLC characters in Jump Force Season 2, releasing alongside Yoruichi from Bleach. Giorno's inclusion in Jump Force was completely unsurprising to me. Realistically, he was the best option. The fan popularity and support for this character to be in the game was overwhelming, so for the sake of those fans, of course I am happy with his inclusion. Also, while there are plenty of other characters in JoJo and Shonen Jump as a whole that I prefer to Giorno, I can't say I'm not excited to try him out in Jump Force. However, a few weeks after Giorno was leaked and everything, it got me thinking. Of course, adding Giorno was the most logical decision for Jump Force, but what's going on with Part 4, in this case Josuke? JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has been present in weekly Shonen Jump crossover titles since the beginning, which makes a lot of sense considering its sheer popularity and influence. To my best understanding, JoJo was much more a Japanese thing for a while, until it became more popular overseas. I suppose that could be said for any manga or anime, but I'm sure there's some that are more popular in the West. Although I'm not too sure on that. But I heard about what JoJo was before I even knew what anime was, so it must have had a lot of influence there. Anyway, let's take a look at how JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has been represented in Shonen Jump crossover titles. To very quickly run through, Famicom Jump Hero Retsuden was an RPG for the NES with only one JoJo character, Joseph Joestar being playable. Then its direct sequel Famicom Jump No. 2, Saikyo no Shichinin, replaced Joseph Joestar with Jotaro Kujo as a playable character. Then with Jump Superstars and Jump Ultimate Stars, both Jotaro and Dio were playable characters, with others appearing as support characters. So it's clear to see that there is a trend with JoJo's representation in crossover games, with Part 3 being the most popular to include, and at the helm of that, Jotaro Kujo. J-Star's Victory Versus is possibly the most popular Jump crossover game, as it was the first to release outside of Japan. This was also the start of the most recognizable anime game style, which is the Arena Fighter. Previously there were RPGs and these platform fighters. I don't know what you would actually call a Smash-like game, but J-Stars was the first Jump crossover game to adapt an Arena Fighter style. Naturally, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was present in this game with two playable characters from the series, Jonathan Joestar and Joseph Joestar. This is interesting because this was the first time Jonathan was playable entirely and the second time Joseph was playable since the first game, Famicom Jump Hero Retsuden. The reason this is interesting is because J-Stars almost represents a new beginning for Jump crossover titles. For many it was their first experience with these types of games, and while I still haven't played J-Stars to this day, it was my first exposure to Jump crossovers as well. Again, with J-Stars being a new beginning so to speak, the idea to incorporate Jonathan and Joseph Joestar made a lot of sense. They are the first two protagonists in the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series. Then in 2019 with the release of Jump Force, we yet again got two playable JoJo's characters, Jotaro Kujo and Dio. So just looking at this logically, when Jump crossover games began to take off and be released worldwide, we saw Jonathan and Joseph playable. Then in the following game, Jotaro and Dio were playable. Now we're getting a JoJo DLC character for Jump Force, but weirdly enough it's a Part 5 character and not a Part 4 character. It seems kind of odd overall. To my knowledge, Giorno and Part 5 are more popular than Josuke and Part 4, but I think some of that hype comes from Part 5 being the most recently animated part. Again, Giorno's inclusion makes sense from a business perspective, which is enough of a reason for any character to be added. But if we're looking at it from that perspective, will Josuke ever make it into any Jump crossover game as a playable character? Because from my point of view, if Giorno is a more popular character than Josuke, then when the decision comes down to choose one more JoJo character for any game, why would they ever choose Josuke over him? It's tough for me to wrap my head completely around this one. To cover my side of things, I do prefer Josuke over Giorno overall, and I prefer his part of the series over Giorno's, so there might be some bias and misunderstanding from my perspective. I also don't have any deep knowledge with business and marketing. It could be possible that choosing a more popular character could make or break a season pass for some people. That's all well and good, but then I have another question about the decision. Giorno is a more popular character, fair enough, let's work with that, but I don't think that explains other decisions that are made by Bandai in this game. I think the one that springs to everyone's mind is Biscuit Kruger. On what planet is Biscuit a more popular character than Meruem, Chrollo or even Leorio? Sure, they added Meruem eventually, and Leoria would be hard to put into a game like Jump Force, but then what about characters like Chrollo or even Pitou? On that same note, is Yoruichi really the most popular Bleach character? Don't get me wrong, I've never really engaged with Bleach, so that's more of a legitimate question as opposed to rhetorical, but still. Most reactions I've seen to Yoruichi is okay, but why? Less so than Bisky, but still, it brought up a lot of surprise and confusion from my perspective. And this doesn't just apply to Jump Force, this also applies to whatever Jump crossover game is next, and even the one after that. I think Jotaro and Dio are the safest bets for JoJo character choices. They are one of the most influential parts of the series, part 3 of course introducing stands for the first time, and they're also both very important to the overall story of JoJo. Mainly Dio, but you can't really have the villain without having the good guy, in this case Jotaro. So if Bandai or whomever publish a Jump crossover game, what reason would they have to add Josuke when there's Giorno, Joseph and even more part 3 characters to choose from? To summarise, I do prefer Josuke over Giorno and would have preferred to have seen him in Jump Force. That being said, Giorno is undoubtedly more popular and I think his gameplay looks like a lot of fun. I also want to say that I am not complaining about Giorno being the next DLC character, as it may have sounded like that at times. Again, I am more than happy. Giorno looks great and he will make the most people happy. But the question I propose is, what's next for part 4? Of course, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has had plenty of games over the years in which you can play as Josuke, but I'm focusing on Jump crossover titles as these will undoubtedly reach the widest audience and will grab my attention more. If part 1 and 2 were represented in J-Stars, it would have made a lot of sense just chronologically to have part 3 and 4 being Jump Force. Obviously the world isn't that simple, but in the next Jump crossover game, what can we expect to see from the JoJo series? A return of parts 1 and 2 would be cool, but ultimately I think that part 3 is a safer bet. But will there ever come a time when putting Josuke into one of these games would be more profitable or more positively received than Giorno, Joseph, Jonathan or potentially whatever characters they could add from the other parts 6, 7 and 8? Probably not. Best solution I have is to put him into a game alongside Yoshikage Kira, as he is probably a more popular character. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching everyone and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.